there's one person I'm unable to determine exactly who it is. Planning Department, is that Hudson?
It's actually Nashua. It's Matt Sullivan. I'm just using a different screen.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so I'll run through the list, and if I don't call you, let me know. Amherst, we have Natasha Kipfer and Eric Hahn here. From
Here. Yep.
Brookline, Tad Putney. I do not see anybody from Hollis, nor Hudson, nor Litchfield. Mark Chamberlain from Lineborough. Nobody from Mason. From Merrimack, Kyle Fox and Don Tumala.
Here.
No one from Milford. Nobody from Mount Vernon. From Nashua, Julie Chismas, Pete Halmy. Anyone else from Nashua?
Meal here.
Well, I count you as NTS, actually. You're a separate entity. About to get to that. Okay, so
we also have Matt Sullivan. Matt, you just want to introduce yourself briefly since people probably don't know who you are.
Sure. Thanks, Jay. I'm a little slow this morning as we had a late ZBA meeting, as you're well aware, last night. I'm Matt Sullivan. I'm the new planning manager for the city of Nashua. I came from Wolfboro and before that Stratford Regional Planning Commission, and I'm well familiar with this process, but I'm looking forward to working with each of you and looking forward to contributing to this meeting today.
great. Welcome aboard.
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
Okay, I don't see anybody from Pelham. Nobody from Wilton. Camille's here from NTS. Linda Dusenberry from DOT. Tim White from DES. Lee Levine from Federal Highway. And from NRPC, we have myself, Greg Lantos, Matt Wakens, Jay Mankara, Derek Stahl, Mason Twombly, and we have some visitors with us as well today. Did I miss anybody? Okay, so that will be the official attendance list. So let's move on to approval of the minutes of September 9th, 2020. If there were any errors or omissions, let us know. Sounds like we got them just about right then, so I will entertain a motion to approve.
Greg,
Yes?
this is Jim Battis
Yes?
from Hudson. The only question I have on the minutes is you listed me as a member, and I'm actually,
Yeah, you're actually not a TTAC member, you're a commissioner,
yes.
and same for Ed Weber. So, right, those are minor changes we should take care of. So noted. So were you making a motion to amend, to approve as amended, Jim? Or somebody should?
Yeah.
Should be a
Not,
TTAC
as I'm not being a member, I can't.
Right, it
make
should be a
motion.
member, so anybody can do it.
This is Mark Chamberlain. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Right, and the second?
Great, I'll second. This is Tim from DES.
Okay, so is there anybody who would not vote to approve or must abstain from the minutes? Let us know. And otherwise, we'll accept them as being approved. Okay, so we'll move on to our regular business, and we're going to start out with the 10-year plan project submissions. You received an attachment as far as the projects and the scoring goes, so I will turn it over to Matt Wakens, who has been handling this process.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So I want to draw your attention to attachment number 2 in your agenda packet. That's the memo I put together that kind of summarizes our solicitation process and our scoring process and rankings. And this these following couple of slides just follow along really with that memo, so you can look at either one. So we did our project solicitation from about the middle of May through the middle of September. We reached out to our communities, notified them that we were doing this process, soliciting projects for this 10-year plan cycle. So we asked each of our communities to verify that existing local 10-year projects that are already in the 10-year plan remain project priorities. We also sent a list of projects that are in our MTP, that's our long-range plan, and we asked communities to consider those projects for inclusion in this current 10-year plan cycle. So hold on. Let's see here. I'm going to stop sharing because this is not advancing. So let me do something here. Hold on. All right. All right, good. Whew. So we received 6 applications. You're going to recall we discussed them at the September TTAC meeting, but as a reminder, we received 2 applications from Brookline. They were both intersection upgrades. One is at Mason Road, the intersection of Mason Road with New Hampshire 13. The second was Runola Road, intersection of Route 13. We received an application from Merrimack, which is to replace the pedestrian bridge over the Sauhegan River. We received 2 applications from Nashua. One is the Complete Streets project on Bridge and Canal Streets, and the other was bus shelter upgrades system-wide for the Nashua transit system. And finally, an application from Wilton, which is to install a pedestrian bridge over Stony Brook, which is near downtown Wilton, and is part of their River Walk project. We also have an additional project that's from the previous round that is from the city of Nashua, and it is the Kinsley Street Sidewalks. Again, it's in the current tip, but it was partially funded in that previous round. So we're adding the unfunded balance to this round. I think you're going to remember also that for this round, the evaluation criteria was updated, and a statewide committee was convened that included all the MPOs and the regional planning commissions. There was also representation from the Hampshire DOT. So these criteria align with state priorities. They are consistent across the Nrpcs, and we did review them in June at TTAC, and we asked you all to help weight those criteria, because criteria mean different things for different people, and they apply differently to different regions. So you'll remember we did weight those, and I did want to remind you of those categories and weights because it's important to the scoring process. So there ended up being 8 categories of criteria. Economic development was first, and that we weighted at 8%. Equity, environmental justice, and accessibility was weighted at 9%. Mobility at 15%. Natural hazard resiliency at 9%. Network significance was weighted at 15%. Safety at 21%, state of repair 15%, and support at 8%. And I did want to go through the sub-criteria, and again, they're important. So for economic development, there are 2 sub-criteria. The first is whether the project improves access to economic activity centers locally or regionally. The second criterion is whether the project improves freight mobility. So that's economic development. For equity and environmental justice and accessibility, the criterion are does the project expand transportation choices for vulnerable populations? And the second criterion is, does the project remove barriers to access for vulnerable populations? For mobility, the considerations are is the project area exhibiting congestion, whether that's motor vehicles or bike or ped or transit, that type of thing. And the second criterion is whether the project impacts or improves congestion. For natural hazard resiliency, the first criterion is the exposure to risk, to natural hazard risk in the in the project area, and that might mean, for example, if a culvert is regularly getting overtopped by increased rainfall, that type of thing. And the second criterion is whether the project mitigates, has a strategy for mitigating that risk. Network significance is about traffic volume and facility importance. Whether that project area connects, significant origins and destinations, for example. Safety is about past safety performance. What is the history of crashes there, and again, whether they're motor vehicle or with pedestrians or bikers and so forth. And then the second criterion is whether whether the project addresses those safety issues. State of repair is about the current infrastructure condition, and for example, if that is a roadway, if it's pavement, we look at the International Roughness Index, which is DOT actually monitors that. So we use that as a consideration. And then the other criterion is under state of repair is got to do with maintenance. Does the project increase maintenance for maintenance costs in the community, or does it reduce maintenance requirements? And then for support, I'm not really sure why I put NA, but what that means, or what support is whether the project is supported in in a local plan or a regional plan, at some level. So those are the criterion we used, and these are the projects we scored. We scored the 6 that were submitted this year. They are eligible for federal aid. They are feasible within our regional allocation of 1.75 million. And this is how it kind of sorted out. The top ranked project was the Complete Streets project in Nashua. The federal estimate on that project is 1.36 million. The second ranked were the transit bus shelter improvements, and that estimated cost is just shy of $500,000. Third ranked was the Merrimack pedestrian bridge. That came in just under $1 million. The fourth ranked was the pedestrian bridge over Stony Brook in Wilton, and that's a little north of $500,000. Fifth ranked was the Mason Road intersection improvements at New Hampshire 13. It's around $145,000. And fifth ranked was the Ruinala Road in New Hampshire 13 intersection improvements, again, just a little north of $500,000. We added, as I mentioned, the unfunded balance for the Kinsley Street sidewalks. That's just shy of $300,000 for a total of $4,248,300. And again, our biannual allocation is 6.175 million. And so there's an available balance of $1,926,700. And we might want to discuss that in a moment, but maybe you can indulge me. I can continue through this just to finish this up. These are the scoring details for each of the projects. I think you can read this. If not, I think in your agenda packet is the same table. But I did want to, just explain how we did this scoring. So that the first column lists the 6 projects that were submitted. columns 2 through 15 lists the sub-criteria and the score for each of those sub-criteria. The next to the last column lists the weighted total for each project, and the last column lists the project ranking. And the way it works is the total possible score for each of these sub-criteria is 10. Each score is then multiplied by the, by the weight, and then, across the column, eventually all of them are, we do, the same, same mathematical calculation, add them up, and that's how you get the weighted score, for the total weighted score. So I thought I would, I thought I'd just go through the example briefly of the Complete Streets project. So the first criteria is local and regional access. Now that's that second column, criteria 1.1. And basically what that is how the project, does the project directly relate to a documented community development effort, or is it in a plan of some sort? So I looked around, in the Nashua Economic Development Plan from 2018, talks about economic development in the mill yard and downtown. And so, you could argue that that this is Bridge Street and Canal Street are major way or corridor for people to get downtown from neighborhoods east of downtown and on the other side of Merrimack River and so on. And so our attitude was that with as far as regional access to economic development projects, there's a moderate positive impact for that, and that's multiplied by 0.04, and you get the the score for that that sub-criteria. For freight mobility, it's a complete street project. It's not really focused on improving, large trucks or freight movement. It's more focused on improving conditions for bikers and walkers, but it will help define, better define where walkers and bicyclists and motor vehicles should be traveling. So it's not that it hurts freight mobility, it's not the real focus though. So it got, a basically minimal positive impact. As far as expanding transportation choice, when Nrpc does planning, we use minority and level of poverty census data to identify environmental justice populations that live in the region. And for our planning region, all of those areas happen to be in Nashua. So if we're talking about expanding transportation choice for vulnerable populations, this project ranks pretty high because it goes through two of those areas. And kind of the same thing from removing barriers to access. We're presumably as an ADA compliant sidewalk project, and that can help but have a very strong positive impact on access. For mobility, let's see, need and performance. That's a function that's of the functional class of the road, and as I said earlier, it's also about whether there is congestion. So we looked at various factors there, and in the end, we gave that a score of 8. Because there is, the functional class ended up being part of the functional class of that segment of road, and also that there is a bit of congestion along there in various places. So we thought that was fairly impactful. For intervention, again, the focus of this project is not necessarily to improve motor vehicle congestion at intersections, but it does improve movement for bikes and peds. So we consider that to have an average mobility, average level of mobility intervention. for natural hazard resiliency, we looked through hazard mitigation plans. Didn't see any emphasis in this corridor on that in the Nashua hazard mitigation plan. So, basically we just, said that this project just, doesn't address hazard risk, and it doesn't mitigate a risk, because it doesn't really seem to be a risk in the corridor, at least not an identified one. As far as network significance, the traffic volume, that's really just a default, so that got a 4. Facility importance, does it connect major locations and destinations? As I said earlier, it does a pretty good job of that. This corridor certainly connects a significant, the east side of Nashua, certainly communities on the east side of the Merrimack River. And also a lot of motor vehicles travel through the region from west to east and head down that way, through downtown and out east along Bridge Street and Canal Street to move through the region. So, we thought that scored pretty high as far as facility importance. For safety importance or safety performance, we used this is kind of a default. We considered traffic crash history there, and it was high enough that we thought it, deserved the highest ranking. For safety measures, it's not, because this, we assume that when these sidewalks and the whole Complete Street project is incorporated, it's going to be ADA compliant, it's going to conform to, best practices. And so given that, we thought it certainly deserves, we can assume that Complete Streets projects have a fairly significant impact on improving safety, but there weren't specific, spot improvements, I don't think, mentioned, so given that we just assume that this will improve safety measures, we assume that at a fairly high level. Current infrastructure condition, that's a default. We looked up the IRI that New Hampshire DOT does every year, and I believe that 7.5 correlates with a poor pavement condition. Reduced maintenance. We gave this an average score. We assume again that there is, because the road is rough, it does need increased maintenance. So this project would have a, presumably improve that. So, not a major focus, but it'll improve to some level. And then as far as support goes, we gave that a 5. It's not that this project isn't called out specifically, in a planning document, but it generally, as a region, certainly our planning encourages, improved, mobility throughout the region and locally. So certainly gets average support. So I'm not going to go through the rest of these projects. I'm certainly willing to answer questions on how we did this, but I did want to, go a little in depth about how we did this for one project, and that's the project I chose to emphasize. And we also have backup documentation for this. We created a project profile for each of these projects, so we have those available. So those are the scoring details. So sort of next steps. Today we are going to be looking for the TTAC to recommend submission of these initial project rankings to DOT. We need to submit them by November 6th. From November through February of next year, DOT is going to review these submissions, and they're going to come back with their own estimates and feasibility of these projects. January through February, RPCs are going to meet with DOT to discuss projects. Our final list of regional priorities is due to DOT at the end of March. So, probably we'll be coming back to you for, that final kind of approval. And then at the end of May, the final list is going to be presented to the governor. So that's kind of a brief summary of project selection and project scoring. So I did want to go ahead, certainly we can answer questions, but I was going to look for a motion, and the motion would be that the Nashua Nrpc TTAC recommends submission to New Hampshire DOT of fiscal year 2023 through 2032 10-year plan project rankings as discussed at today's meeting. So that's the motion. I'm not making the motion, I don't think. That's just the suggested motion. So any discussion, or what's people's pleasure?
I'll make the motion. This is Julie from Nashua,
Okay,
as you phrased.
okay, thanks, Julie.
Looking for a second. Come on, folks.
I'll second it, Don Twomala.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Let's see. So Greg, did we go, remind me, do we need to go through a roll call on this? Or
Just
do we
go through it town by town. Each town gets one vote.
Okay,
Should be fairly perfunctory to approve this.
okay, so Amherst.
Natasha, yes.
Thank you, Natasha. Brookline.
Dad votes yes.
Okay. So I don't think anybody's here from Hollis, but if anybody arrived late? No. Anybody from Hudson? No. Anybody from Litchfield? Okay. Lineborough?
Lineborough votes yes.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Mason? Merrimack?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Milford? Mount Vernon? Nashua?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Pelham? Nobody. Wilton? NTS?
Yes.
Thanks, Camille. New Hampshire, so New Hampshire DOT?
I abstain. I don't vote on the 10-year plan project.
I didn't hear that, but,
That's an abstention.
okay, yes, yeah, thank you. And then DES?
Yes.
Okay, all right. By my count, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We make it.
You
All right, well,
know,
thank you.
NRPC is a yes vote.
Yes. Thank goodness. All right. Well, all right, so that concludes my tutorial. And thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thank you. So there is 1.9 million in federal funds that has not been applied for. So we certainly don't want to leave money on the table. We know there's a lot of project needs in our region. You know, they're listed throughout the MTP. So we have been in discussion with Nashua as far as adding the Turnpike exit 2 off-ramp to Dozer Road, and I'll bring that up for you to view. So that should be visible to everybody. That's the concept of an off-ramp, and that would serve industrial, office, residential areas in South Nashua. So we have this as an MTP project at a total cost of about 1.85 million, assuming FY 2038 construction year, so that would be advanced a little bit if it were funded at this time. So I think it fits in pretty well with the remaining balance that we have. We feel it may well qualify for 100% federal funding under toll credits, but obviously this is a late-breaking development and something that we need to talk to DOT about to confirm this is a potential project. There's some precedent in the fact that the Exit 5 ramp reconfiguration project was put into the 10-year plan using federal funds. A little bit different in that that ramp reconfiguration is to a state highway. This is an off-ramp to a local road. So, it's a little bit different here, but, this is, what we're looking at is potential use of the balance. We certainly want to, get a good project in there. So I'll throw it open to discussion.
This is Jay, just jumping in a little bit on the rationale and basically why I think this is a good project, but just backing up a little bit, when we realized we had about $1.9 million on the table, we did have a conference call with DOT to discuss kind of what are the options and are there existing projects. One of the concepts that came up was we believe there's likely a shortfall in the 101 project. Could we apply those surplus dollars there? And the answer is basically we can't. We can't come up with a mechanism to do that, and that's simply because we are adding now projects to the last 2 years of the 10-year plan. We just can't pull those back. So long and short of it is if we don't program these funds ourselves, they will ultimately wind up just being used elsewhere in the state. We really don't have another mechanism for clawing them back, for getting a credit for the future. It's just the way it works. We don't need it, we don't need it. So that's logical. But what they did urge us to do, which was a logical thing to do, is go back to our MTP and look for projects that are fiscally constrained, are listed, they have been vetted, they have gone through the process. These are projects that the communities have brought forward. And very importantly, they've gone through a public process, public hearings, and ultimately adoption. So we're not making up projects, we're not pulling them out of the air. So basically, what I thought made sense is let's look for projects that are less than that 1.9 million, where ideally there is an opportunity to get toll credits to cover the local match. This really is a project that rises to the surface. It's within the dollar amount that we need. Again, it's a vetted project, it's fiscally constrained. And if we, by including it in the 10-year plan, we have the opportunity to advance it by about 4 years. So to me, that seems like a win-win. It seems like a logical option. At this point, I don't think there's an opportunity for to create a new project, that has not been vetted and that has not gone through any kind of process. So to me, that seems to make sense, but let's throw it open and see what other people think.
Jay, if I could. I think that's a great project. I would throw one other for your consideration. I know we've been derailed by COVID a little bit on the study you were doing for us on the US 3 corridor. But I wondered, in a similar vein as the project you just mentioned, what about the Exit 12 north side ramps?
I think we could, certainly can discuss those. I don't know though if those projects, if those could fall in under that $1.9 million. But again, I have no idea. I have no idea what the associated cost of those would be.
But also note we're assuming at this point about 1.9 million, but all these projects have yet to be reviewed by DOT, and it's very possible that they'll be adjusting some of the costs upward, which will eat into that balance somewhat. we still think we'd be in the ballpark on the Dozer Road project. I think the exit 12 would be quite a bit more money.
Jay, do we have any sense of what kind of daily traffic count we might be looking at on that project? Just ballpark?
It has been modeled. I'd have to look into it.
I'm guessing we're talking thousands of cars, not
Right.
hundreds? Or
It'd be thousands.
Hi, this is Julie. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared necessarily as well as I should have been for this conversation. And I do believe I have some numbers from VHB that has looked at potential volumes through here. The city has had preliminary conversations with DOT Turnpikes on this. So, but I honestly don't have the study at my fingertips right now.
We could certainly get that out to folks though.
Yep, I can pull that, see what we have for information and get it to Nrpc for distribution.
Matt, this is Mark. I know the last meeting we discussed whether the Wilton funding was adequate for that bridge. Did anybody ever follow up with them to make sure that they had the right numbers?
No, it's going to go to the DOT review at this point, and they'll be looking at all projects and let us know.
Okay.
There is a very good chance though that we will see some of those projects bump up in cost.
Any other comments? Okay, I guess we can move on then to some of our Nrpc project updates. So I will start out with the Nashua Interregional Transit Study. So as we've discussed before, the purpose is to evaluate the ridership potential for and financial feasibility of public transportation service options between the Nashua region and Middlesex County, Massachusetts. Could you pull that down so I can share the screen?
Oop, sorry. My bad.
No problem. So what we have done recently is to develop ridership estimation for a shuttle bus between Nashua and Umass Lowell. So the total.
Hey, Greg, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Got to click both of them. All right, so the total market potential, and this is based on the 2019 school year pre-COVID, was obtained from Umass Lowell, and they have 346 employees and 227 students from the Nashua area that do commute to Umass Lowell. So the procedure that we've used for ridership estimation, it uses the same mode split model that we have previously used for passenger rail ridership estimation. And again, in this case, the auto and the proposed shuttle are the available modes. So the procedure develops total travel impedances, which is the sum of all travel times and costs, and any monetary costs are converted to travel times. And these are based on assumed value of time, which is $15 per hour for students and $30 per hour for faculty and other employees. And this recognizes that students having much lower or no incomes are much more cost sensitive to prices than those who have regular incomes. So the auto operating costs include fuel, maintenance, and the mileage component of depreciation. And we estimate this at about 30 cents per mile. Parking costs, we've been told, are $450 per year for students and $400 for faculty. And these costs are allocated over the total number of academic days in the school year and assume that people commute each day. We then adjust the impedances by the vehicle occupancy, which we've been told is 1.07 for faculty employees and 1.5 for students. The shuttle bus is assumed to depart from a parking lot in South Nashua. There might also be originating from Crown Street lot in downtown, which would be for the convenience of downtown commuters. So we developed these impedances for each town, and get the auto access distances computed, the travel times, and so forth, and develop the total impedances and the adjusted impedances for the vehicle occupancy. And then these impedances are plugged into the model to produce mode splits, and we've done this for 2 different shuttle scenarios. One is a free shuttle service that would be operated at Umass Lowell for students and its employees. And then the second would be with a $5 daily round trip fare for the use of the shuttle bus. So parking at the shuttle bus would be free for both scenarios. So this table then provides the splits between auto and shuttle and broken down by faculty and student from each origin community. And we'll just take a look at the totals. So under scenario 1, there would be 67% or 385 auto trips and 33% shuttle trips, representing 188. And as you can see that the faculty is just much more likely to use the auto mode than the students, as they are not as persuaded by cost considerations. And where there would be a charge for the shuttle bus, then we have 83% auto use and only 17% or 97 trips we are projecting for use by the shuttle. So I think, you know, it would make most sense if this is, you know, a service that the university could provide free to its people, because they would be much less likely to use it if they have to pay for it. So we will be developing the financial analysis of running this type of service, and then we will move on next to developing the ridership analysis for a shuttle bus from the park and ride at the Turnpike exit 8 down to the Lowell Gallagher terminal, where it would connect with the commuter rail and sort of be an interim option to an extension of passenger rail service to Nashua, as well as provide the opportunity to connect to LRTA buses. Any questions? Okay. So I will move on to our discussion of transit fiscal constraint. So in our 2019 federal certification review, this resulted in a corrective action stating that the MTP must include fiscal constraint, as well as operations and maintenance needs analysis in consultation with Nashua Transit System. So in our Metro plan, fiscal constraint has traditionally been done for highway projects, but not for transit. And I would say the reason for this is because highway projects are associated with short-term implementation costs, and the fiscal constraint analysis is to ensure that the sum of all these projects, including this regular statewide maintenance, does not exceed the theoretical allocation of federal dollars to the region. By contrast, transit service are ongoing and have regular costs associated with their operation, and there are more sporadic needs for large capital expenditures. So it's we really haven't seen the need to develop the same level of fiscal constraint, but it's a corrective action that I think the FTA wants to see how we're able to fit our capital expenditure needs into the financial plan. So that's what we're doing here with the new financial analysis that's been developed. So this is really a two-step process. So first, we develop the operations and maintenance costs, the revenues and the funding requirements for actually operating the system. And second, we balance these operating needs with the anticipated FTA funding for the MTP long-range period to result in available balances that would be available for purchase of the capital equipment. And then third, to determine the capital requirements through consultation with NTS, and then fill in the discretionary capital grant amounts that would satisfy the capital expenditures and maintain a positive fund balance. So I have the O&M table up here that develops the overall funding needs to operate the system. And some of the assumptions that go into it are fixed route expenses are estimated to increase 1.85% per year and demand response by 2% per year. And basically, you know, we looked at this fiddling around with numbers, and it just became evident that some cost savings and fixed route are necessary in order to maintain a long-term operational balance. NTS estimated the 2021 revenues. We then estimate the fixed route and demand response revenue to increase 0.5% per year. This is per NTS estimates. And other service revenues, which would include the contract services, advertising, et cetera, would increase 2.5% per year. We assume that local funding will increase 2% per year and state funding 2.5% per year, which seems to follow a historical trend from the past. And then the FTA formula funds will cover the remainder of the balance needed to operate the system. So we get to column N, totals FTA funds that are needed for operations. So then we move over to a fiscal constraint table, and it pulls in the numbers from the final column from the O&M table for the FTA operating assistance. And this total is then subtracted from the FTA totals in the first columns C through F. So we have the sum of 5307, 5310, and 5339 funding, and then subtracting out that needed for the operating assistance results in an FTA balance that would be available for capital projects. Then we entered into a discussion with NTS to determine what sort of estimates they had for capital project expenditures. We plugged those in and then went back and filled in, you know, approximate 5339 discretionary grants that would have to be applied for in order to meet those funding needs. So we're looking to maintain a positive cumulative balance throughout the entire period. And we have done that, even though obviously in any given year there could be negative numbers because a grant may have been applied for is pending. But as long as there's a cumulative balance from the past, then it's fine for it to sit there. So that's what we've done, and I believe this meets what FTA was looking for in terms of developing a financial plan for transit. Any questions? I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep with this one. Okay, and then the other project I want to talk about is our congestion management process, and we're been engaged in collecting a lot of data and analyzing it. So the CMP update, which we anticipate will be completed pretty much towards the end of the fiscal year in June, has several components. And it is an update of a 2010 document. So first is the existing conditions analysis. We're going to look at changes in traffic from the last CMP update that was done, and I'll review some of those numbers today. We then do the analysis of congested conditions, looking at speeds that are occurring during peak hours, volume to capacity ratios. We also look at transit on-time performance. And we'll talk about some of these items in future meetings. Then we'll move on to future traffic forecasts and congestion analysis. And then finally, project impacts on relieving congestion and programs such as transportation demand management, how they might play a role as well. Okay, so in terms of traffic trends, the FE Turnpike, there's been a 10-year traffic growth of greater than 20,000 through Merrimack, representing very high percent increases, and between 11,000 to 14,000 through Nashua, more moderate percent increases. I've highlighted these. On Route 101, we've seen counts virtually unchanged throughout the region over that time period, last 10, 12 years. On 101A, we've seen moderate declines along most segments, a greater decline in downtown Nashua, in part due to the diversion from the Broad Street Parkway. On US 3 and Merrimack, there's been significant increase in northern Merrimack due to the connection with the airport access road, and we see moderate decreases along other segments to the south. Along New Hampshire 3A, increase along the northern segment in Litchfield, again due to the airport access road, we believe, and little change has occurred along the Hudson segments. New Hampshire 111, there's been slight declines along most road segments. In Nashua, a significant increase along the uncongested segment at the Hollis line. New Hampshire 102 is moderately increased at the northernmost segment near Londonderry, but declines elsewhere to the south. And on New Hampshire 130, we see a similar pattern to New Hampshire 101, increases at the Nashua Hollis line, declines within the city of Nashua. New Hampshire 38, finally, we get some moderate increases throughout the entire roadway, between 6 to 9% for the time period for all Pelham segments. Main Street Nashua, there have been significant declines of 20% and greater along most of the segments. And then Daniel Webster Highway in Nashua, we see moderate declines ranging from 11 to 18%. So it's interesting, we don't see the huge increase in traffic and congestion that perhaps would have been forecasted 10, 15 years ago for our roadways. And, you know, so this tells us something about what's going on. We still do the traffic forecasting for the future, but, and I don't know that we're going to make any changes to land use scenarios when we present these forecasts. This was done a couple of years ago, so those numbers should be still good for forecasting, and typically they're not updated until we do a full MTP update, which would be in another 2 years. So that presents the historical trends that we'll be using in our CMP. As I said, we'll get into more nitty-gritty discussion of speeds and volume to capacity ratios at another meeting. So that wraps up that. And we have one more project to discuss. That's the Route 101A rail trail feasibility. And I'll turn it over to Matt.
Matt, you're muted.
There we go. Thank you. I was saying that I don't have a formal presentation for this. I think we're gonna do that in December. But kind of briefly, this so we have a regional complete streets committee, and we meet regularly. to discuss ideas for encouraging alternative modes of travel. And obviously complete streets includes motor vehicles and transit and bike and ped. So it's, it's just about making all of those modes more available. And one of the concepts that our Complete Streets Committee has been discussing is the feasibility of a rail with trail or a rail trail in that rail corridor, that freight rail corridor that runs parallel to 101A. And it basically runs, if you're talking east to west, it runs from downtown Nashua all the way through to, to Milford and beyond to Wilton and beyond there. So we know that, it's pretty obvious Route 101A is very good at moving motor vehicles, but it's not so good at moving, bikes and pedestrians. And, we just think that, a separated use trail would be ideal for that corridor. So this subcommittee has just been working on putting together information. We developed a corridor profile, and it's just some interesting facts. Within a 2-mile buffer around Route 101A, which includes that corridor, that rail corridor, 115,000 people live there. That's 54% of our planning region's population. There are 63,000 jobs in that corridor, 45,000 households, 3,000 of which don't have access to a vehicle. There are 66 parks within a 2-mile buffer of that corridor. So there's lots going on. And our corridor, the corridor profile we've put together also has really interesting information about that rail corridor. It talks about the ownership, which it happens to be owned by Pan American Railways, a very big company. Our document talks about the track rating. The rating of the track all along there is very low. And there's some kind of estimated costs of upgrading that track to be more economically viable as a rail line. So the thing is that all of Pan Am's holdings are for sale. So that they're, again, they're a big company. They're probably going to be bought by a gigantic rail company, who knows who. But anyway, what this subcommittee is working on is again, investigating the feasibility of somehow incorporating a rail with trail, which would be a shared use trail that's in the right of way, that would be next to the active rail line, or if for some reason that rail line became defunct, then it would just be a rail trail. And, and I think I would say that if at least in my opinion, it would be better if that rail line were upgraded and it was a viable rail line, and who knows, that may happen. But and if that's the case, we still think that there could be a separated use trail that could coexist with that active line. So anyway, this subcommittee of the Regional Complete Streets Advisory Committee is going to morph and become its own entity. We're going to call it the Friends of the Sauhegan Valley Rail Trail. We're seeking nonprofit status, and the whole purpose of these Friends of the Rail Trail is going to be to spread awareness, advocate for some sort of project along there, fundraise, which is key reason to be a nonprofit, and then that this group would identify and advance projects. So I mean, to be clear, this corridor is not, it's owned by a company who's not gonna do a rail trail. It's not gonna be interested in that. But this group just wants to be positioned for what might come in the future. So, and what's interesting is, federal, the surface transportation, legislation is supposedly going to be reworked next year. So who knows, there may be opportunities there. But so the next steps are that as it stands now, October 28th, we're going to have an information session. It's going to be at night at 7 p.m. It'll be a webinar type of thing. And then beyond that, in January, February, or say November, December, January, we want to try to approach, maybe the congressional delegation, try to start, again, increasing awareness of this, what is right now just a concept, and see where it goes and whether, the political will might, we might be able to build on it or build it up, and then kind of see what happens next year. So that's what I have for now. And I think I was talking to Greg earlier. This group has a presentation that goes into much more details and has some nice graphics and that kind of thing. That kind of talks about what I've been generally talking about here. So I think at the December TTAC, we'll bring that presentation, and I think it's really interesting. Just the whole kind of description of the rail corridor is just interesting. So any case, that's what I have for that. And if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out to me offline, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. So that's pretty much a wrap on our updates. So now we'll move on to hear from others. Do we have any municipal updates today? Speak up.
Hey Greg, this is Julie. I did pull up the information for volumes on Dozer Road because I had to. Can't let that stuff go, as you're probably aware. And I'm showing, and I don't think Tad's still on, but I'm showing they anticipate 225 vehicles per hour during the weekday morning peak and 740 vehicles per hour during the weekday evening peak. So I don't have the total daily, or expected daily, but I do have the peak hours based on, ITE and all
we can
that.
get a daily estimate from those two numbers, and I'll look at what our traffic model estimated as well. So it would be in the thousands, obviously. It's a heavily utilized area down there. So
I was looking at some of the peak hour numbers on DOT's traffic counting site for similar ramps, and it exceeds several of the ramps in the area. Those estimates exceed several of the ramps.
Yeah.
Like exit 2 and 4, of course, depending on the direction.
Okay, so we'll want to be talking with DOT about this project very quickly. Any other municipal updates? Okay, so we'll move on to NHDOT.
I have nothing.
Nothing from DOT. New Hampshire DES, Tim.
Thanks, Greg. Just one item. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of the fact that a couple weeks ago we started a new solicitation. It's a fiscal year 2020 solicitation for our State Clean Diesel program that's utilizing Diesel Emission Reduction Act funding from the EPA. Hopefully you've seen the notice on our website, or the notice has been passed along to you, perhaps by the Planning Commission. So as in the past, we're going to be using Volkswagen funding to match the funding that we get from the EPA to run the program. So with the EPA funding and the Volkswagen funding and the bonus that we get for matching the EPA funding, we're looking at about $750,000 for this year's program. So there's a lot of opportunity there. We've got a deadline for applications of 4 p.m. November 16th. And I think what we're going to do this year is, if we have any funding left over after the first round, we're going to go into immediately into a second round of funding that'll have a deadline of January 19th of 2021. And hopefully we'll be able to get through that money quicker doing it that way. All of the information that you need in order to submit a project is on our website, or it's on the New Hampshire Office of Strategic Initiatives website. They're the Volkswagen lead agency. But if you don't see what you need there, I mean, just get in touch with me, or you can get in touch with Jessica Wilcox from Mobile Sources at DES, and we can both get you the information that you need to fill out the applications. And hopefully we'll have a good response to that. And that's what I got. Thanks, Ben.
Great, thank you, Tim. And Federal Highway.
Yeah, hi, Greg. This is Lee here. Well, I saw in the notes from the last meeting that I had talked about reauthorization, so not much by way of an update, but we do have a continuing resolution that was signed by the president, keeping us in business through December 11th, and then a FAST Act extension through the end of federal fiscal year 21. So no big multi-year reauthorization, of course, but hopefully we'll get to that at some point before the end of the next federal fiscal year, but we'll see when that time comes as well. And also just wanted to thank you, Greg, and anyone else who's been involved in the working on the Nashua Urbanized Area Agreement. And if I have any further comment, I'll try to get that to you by the end of the week. But you know, I've looked at it previously and provided our comment, and we think it does a really good job and brings us into compliance for that particular requirement. So thanks again for all your help in getting us there.
So I've heard from all the Massachusetts agencies, and they had some comments. Nate Miller also had some, so I'll be putting together the final draft, or final document incorporating everybody's comments in the next few days. And then the MassDOT wanted to have a conference call to discuss. I wrote back, I don't think that's necessary at all. We have the comments. We'll send out the document, and with a notation that the MPOs need to approve it, get their MPO endorsement, at least in Massachusetts, prior to MassDOT being willing to sign this instruction that they gave, because MassDOT, the secretary, actually is the signatory for the MPOs down there. So They want their MPOs to take action. So, we would plan to have our endorsement in December. So, I mean, hopefully we'd have all the signatures back by the end of the year. I can't guarantee it, but, we'll have it passed and, pretty much cruising towards the end point, right around that point.
Okay, great. Yeah.
It's been a process.
Yes, I know you put a lot of effort, a lot of coordination, so really appreciate that. And let me know if there's anything else I can do to help with any of the cross-border coordination or anything.
Just to prove it, that's all we can. It's like, take our corrective action off and we'll be happy. Okay, great, thank you. So that's it for today. Unless there's any other business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And a second.
This is Julie, I'll second.
And if there's nobody in opposition, I'll declare us adjourned. Thank you, everybody. See you next month.
Thank you.